Up next, we have a great conversation between Michael Moe and Rey Saldana. Michael Moe, as you know, is the founder and CEO of GSV. Rey is the president and CEO of Communities in Schools. He's also an alumnus of the Communities in Schools program when he was a student himself. He served as the regional advocacy director for the Raise Your Hand Texas Foundation and the chair of the San Antonio Metropolitan Transit Agency. He previously served 4 terms on the San Antonio City Council, so really excited to hear their conversation. Please give it up for Michael and Rey.
That wasn't really good enough. But why don't you guys stand? It's been a long lunch so far. Stand up. Stand up. Now let's give a real ovation. All right, thank you very much. So we're going to finish strong, guys. And this is going to be a fun but quick conversation. Communities in Schools is an organization that's completely aligned with the Summit's goals of giving everybody an equal opportunity to participate in the future. Bill Milliken, the founder of Communities in Schools, had some travel logistic issues, so he couldn't be here, but we're lucky to have Rey, who's the CEO, with us. So I think many of you do know Communities in Schools, but talk about who you are and what you guys do.
Well, first of all, Michael, thank you, and a privilege to be up here on stage with you and to be an invited guest of GSV and with great partners like ASU. So Communities in Schools, I want to make sure folks are clear on this. So we are a national nonprofit. We're working about half the country. We've been at this work for 45 years. What we do is we place a trained staff member inside schools to lift the burdens away from principals and teachers, to let them focus on learning. We focus on all of the other challenges that a student brings into the schoolroom. And we've been doing this for 45 years. We're now in 3,000 schools, 26 states. We're the largest provider of wraparound student services, integrated student supports. But if Bill Milliken were here, he would say, look, it's not programs that are changing students' lives, it's relationships. That's what started this work 45 years ago, and I get to lead today.
And by the way, we gave Bill the Lifetime Achievement Award 2013, and since then it's been even more incredible what's going on. Yeah, give a hand for that.
And I guarantee you Bill is watching right now, so Bill, good to see you.
So, talk about the ROI, because I think that's one of the most compelling things. It's a not-for-profit. You work with 1.6 million students. By the way, that's the good news. Bad news is 12 million students that are in poverty. But talk about how you guys look at ROI and why that's so important.
Yeah, I think what you have to understand, and our founder understood this. He's been making a pitch for 45 years about how we design schools to ensure that they are just schools where students are not just understanding the learning, but what our founder likes to say is you can't be turned on to learning unless you're turned on to living, and living is the hard part. And if you're not designing for that inside schools, then you have an epidemic of a dropout problem, you have an epidemic with attendance issues and behavior issues. And the ROI for us, we know that for every site coordinator we place in a school, and we focus on Title I schools all across the country, it's an $11 return for every $1 invested. And we do a cost sharing. It's the state and federal and local level dollars that we combine with some philanthropy to ensure that we ease the burden off some of the schools. That's how we're in 3,000 schools.
Yeah, so by the way, if you invest with GSV, you get 11 times return your money too. But anyway, community schools is another. So I think there's 133 million reasons why you're a little bit happier today than you may have been 3 months ago. What happened with Communities in Schools recently?
So if you are not in the room right now, there is folks who are celebrating with their paletas, these popsicles. There is a rush of joy that comes to their head. That is the rush of joy that came to the head of myself as a head of a nonprofit. And if you've worked in nonprofit, I just want to set the stage here, because one of the largest, I've been doing this for 10 years, one of the largest unrestricted gifts I'd ever received, and I worked really hard for this, was a $100,000 unrestricted gift. This is November of 2021, and I get a call about somebody telling me an anonymous donor wants to make a donation to Communities in Schools. And on the other side of that is somebody who says the gift will be $133 million to see your work spread throughout the country.
How's that?
And the donor is Mackenzie Scott, who's been dropping these money bombs all across the country for nonprofits all across the U.S. And it's just incredible because what we think about, we're so focused on the mission. We're just coming from 2 years of the pandemic, and our staff needed a little hope, and that was a jet fuel of hope for our organization.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said this to begin with. Talk about, you went to Stanford University. That was just kind of a smooth path to get there, right? No, we'll talk about your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I tell folks the way that I met communities in schools, not because I applied to become the leader, but I met communities in schools the same way that any one of our students meets communities in schools. I met Mrs. Reyes, and Mrs. Reyes was in the third wing of my high school, and I'm first generation American, first in my family to go off to college. Both of my parents didn't make it past the 8th grade, so I had a certain understanding of what my future could be. But Mrs. Reyes is somebody who walked me through not just how to apply for college, how to pay for college, even our staff have to be Swiss Army knives. She was there to convince my mother, who did not want to let me move from San Antonio to Palo Alto, California, that this was a good move. And she actually helped me on my first plane ride when I was 18, making sure that I understood how to get through the gates and arrive at Palo Alto. And that was a journey that could not have been possible without Mrs. Reyes. And there are 4,000 Mrs. Reyes all across the country working at communities and schools. That's the real fuel of this work.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talk about going back to this gift, and you had some other large gifts that came along with that too. Talk about the big idea that you can now achieve.
Yeah, so we know that there are 11.6 million students who are living in poverty, and for us, the focus is we want to work with the students who need our support the most. These are students who are not just suffering with issues of not having access to food or shelter or clothing. These are students who are suffering from the emotional grips of having lost a parent. And we have a vision, which is to serve in every Title I school in the country. There are 70,000 Title I schools in the US. We're in 3,000. I think with the gift, as well as this mind shift that is happening for school leaders and for legislators to really redesign schools to be just, it's our hope and ambition to get into every Title I school in the country. And that's ambitious and significant, but at 3,000, we are the largest provider of this work inside schools, and we've got a ways to go.
I mean, just think about how transformational that's going to be for our country when that happens. All these kids with this potential, but haven't had the resources or the guidance to really show them what they could do.
Yeah, I really have to tip my hat to, again, the 3,000 staff we have, because if you imagine, so we're in communities like rural West Virginia or urban Atlanta, and in Wyoming County, West Virginia. I'm talking to one of our staff 2 days ago, and they're telling me about making sure that some of their students who still get access to water through a well system, making sure that that function is something that they have to navigate for them and their family. In urban Atlanta, dealing with the influx of new Americans, Central Americans who make up the majority of this school, there are different ways that we have to approach this work. That's why in that way, communities and schools is locally focused, but nationally relevant now as we think about this mind shift that is really communicating its way. And it's an important time for U.S. public schools, and we have a role to play in that.
So, and just, I mean, I think everybody has some appreciation for this, but I mean, COVID was tough for all students. It was especially tough for your students. What did you guys do during COVID to support your community?
Well, first, there was a little bit of a crisis. As an organization, communities in schools, what happens when you shut down schools? And there are 50 million students who are told to just learn from home. We actually recognized that the value of our work is that relationship that we had built. So we had to go out into the field and knock on doors. We were in more front porches and stairwells than we had ever been in our 45-year history. Understanding that if there is a student whose family is struggling with, whether it's food insecurity, homelessness, or perhaps some violence or trauma that is happening in the home, that doesn't stop. In many cases, what we recognize as a country is that school was the safest place for many of our students. But as I was listening to a talk yesterday, now that we've returned to school, what we haven't returned to is we haven't returned to learning because we haven't necessarily returned to relationships. And that was the key for us. And going out and working with community members, with our families, probably the newest trick that we've got. And it's really beyond just the four walls. That's always been our work. It's just we had been focused so much on the students that were inside the school. Now we're doing a lot more knocking on doors. And as a former elected official, I'm used to that. But many of our staff had to get over how important that was to stabilize the student.
So at the conference, you have education leaders, people that care about education from around the world, and are here because they want to make a difference. And here's an organization, 45 years in existence, that's having unbelievable scale impact. What can this community do for you?
Well, as I talked about, my founder has been making a pitch for 45 years, but he isn't alone. There are a lot of nonprofits who are working to support bringing whole student supports within a school system, but there is a tension right now. If you look at any headline or attend any local school board meeting, there is a question about the vision for schools and how they should be designed and what they should and shouldn't be doing. What we need are advocates. It is Alice Walker who says that the most common way we give away our power is by thinking we don't have any. We're focused on Title I schools, which means we're focused on some of those communities who give away their power often. They need to be lifted by voices in this room, by voices who attend and hold a certain power, that there is a vision for school that does include whole student supports, that includes their mental health services, social emotional learning, all of the things we need to build a relationship to get beyond what students' barriers may be in front of them. So we need advocates and we need voices.
Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you very much. This is great.
Thank you, Michael.